Yo, imagine waking up one day and the world you knew, gone. Cities swallowed whole. Mountains reduced to islands. And the water? It's rising every single day. So, let's dive into the part two.
However, he still didn't know what this spiritual source meant. He had already gotten two, but the question remained, what would happen when he got all five? Behind him, he heard the sound of breaking glass. With such an influx of opponents, our hero would find out soon enough. A zombie had broken the window in his bedroom. Like the previous one, he was bitten all over, but it didn't bother him a bit. Driven by endless hunger, he moved forward. This zombie was different from the previous ones. It was strong enough to break the aluminum glass window. But that didn't mean anything. Sui had to kill it to survive. The epic battle began. Zombie versus human, hammer versus bone. Who would win? But his attack never reached its target, as the zombie was able to grab his weapon without any problem. As Sui expected, this zombie was indeed stronger and more agile than the previous one. To say the least, he was even able to block its attack with his hand, which was a sign of his primitive martial skills. Had he not received the second spiritual source that increased his strength, his defeat would have been guaranteed. Fortunately, as long as he felt that he could fight the zombie on equal footing, that meant he had a chance of winning. But it only seemed that way. In the next moment, he had already given the zombie a leg kick. In Su Yi's opinion, this should have been enough to at least make the zombie retreat. But it didn't work at all. The zombie stared at his leg disdainfully, as if asking what the hell he was going to do. Su Yi's plan was doomed to failure from the beginning, because he did not take into account that zombies were not afraid of pain, and such kicks did not hurt them at all. Unfortunately, Su Yi didn't have this ability, and he could feel the pain perfectly. In the next instant, the zombie sent him flying with its kick. Hitting the closet with force, our hero shattered the closet. Lying under the pile of clothes, Su Yi coughed and breathed heavily. The damage from the blow was worse than he could have imagined. The pain was so intense that he thought the zombie had broken several of his ribs. But the worst part was that it was far from over. He was hurt and still weak, and the zombie kept coming. Was this really the end, and he was going to die like this? It was as if time had slowed down. Su Yi did not want to die at all. Not too long ago, he was able to get a good job, and his life was finally starting to get better. In addition, it looked like he was one of the few lucky ones to survive this disaster. It would be a great shame to die for nothing. At that moment, our hero made a firm decision. He had to stay alive at all costs. Although the zombie was stronger than him, Su Yi still had a well-functioning brain, which he decided to take advantage of. Grabbing his clothes, our hero froze waiting for the zombie to fall into his trap. Millions of years of evolution for one moment. As soon as the zombie stepped on the cloth, Su Yi put his plan into action. Unexpectedly, the zombie lost its balance and started to fall. For our hero, this was a chance. He immediately rushed at the zombie with a hammer in his hands. Fortunately, hammer blows, unlike kicks, very rarely failed. Just one blow was enough to make the zombie fall to the ground, and this time it looked like it was really dead. Once it was over, Su Yi could finally exhale a sigh of relief. He was able to survive, and that was the most important thing. For killing the zombie, he had obtained another spirit source, and now he only had two more to obtain. Su Yi also discovered that the spiritual source had healing power, as the wounds he had received during the battle with the zombies had already disappeared. This was just what he needed, because otherwise he would probably just die. But it didn't end there. Suddenly, our hero heard some noise behind him. It was the zombies again, and this time there were two of them. With a fierce roar, they rushed towards Su Yi. However, this time our hero had even more strength, and he was able to deal with the first zombie with a single blow without much difficulty. Unfortunately, the second zombie was able to get close to him and grab his arm. But even in this seemingly hopeless situation, the hammer did its job perfectly and mercilessly touched the heads of the zombies. This time the zombie finally died. After he fell to the floor with a thud, there was a long-awaited silence. But it didn't last long, as in the next moment, Su Yi started receiving notifications that he had successfully collected 5 spiritual sources and had leveled up. Now he obtained a level 1 physic, and to level up to the next level, he needed to obtain 10 spiritual sources. Thanks to the level up, our hero was already feeling much better than before, but even that wasn't all the benefits. A system window appeared in front of him with 2 available enhancement options, stomach and lungs. Both of these enhancements were very useful during the apocalypse, for which Su Yi couldn't help but think twice. But since there was water everywhere and there was a risk that he would end up in the water, the lung volume was clearly more useful. That was why he resolutely chose to strengthen his lungs. The system immediately began to reinforce. In the process, he began to glow brightly and his entire body was pierced with pain. Some strange energy began to flow into his lungs, expanding and strengthening them. It was quite a painful process, but in Su Yi's opinion, this pain was worth it. Once it was over, he finally opened his eyes. He could really feel that his lung volume had increased compared to before. It felt like he could now hold his breath for at least 3 minutes. Sui had hope, because now that he could evolve, surviving in this harsh and cruel world didn't seem like such an impossible task. According to his assumptions, if he collected 10 more spiritual sources, he would once again receive a single enhancement. In that case, his chances of getting out of here would increase even more. However, it was too early to think about that, and first he had to find a new place to live. This room was no longer livable, so Su Yi decided to sleep in a neighboring apartment. At the end of this busy day, he made a decision. He would definitely get the hell out of here as soon as he got the next improvement. A big splash is heard and Su Yi falls into the water. As he is drowning, he hears a voice telling him to get stronger. Hearing this, Su Yi comes to his senses and wonders what is happening, why he is drowning. But as he sinks even more, a giant hand appears underneath him. Su Yi lands on the hand and looks at the giant cloaked figure standing in front of him. The mysterious figure was telling him to become stronger. Our hero asks him who he is, but he only says that he was waiting for him at that place. From his answer, our hero managed to understand very little, and he again tried to say something to the statue. But suddenly he opens his eyes and realizes that it was all a dream. Su Yi was completely bewildered by what had happened, but now he had bigger problems. There was a huge shadow looming over him, which could only mean one thing: there was someone behind him. He turned around to look, but what he saw instantly threw him into fear and shock. A giant toad-like creature with demonic red eyes was staring at him from behind the window. A huge monster with a long tongue staring at you isn't a picture you want to see when you wake up. However, Su Yi had no choice. It was the first time he had seen such a big monster, so he assumed that it was the creature that had nibbled the corpse he had seen earlier. Our hero realized that his only chance to get out of here was to kill this monster. The creature knew that he was here and would surely attack him if he tried to swim to the other buildings. But for now, Su Yi wasn't confident in his strength, and decided that the best solution would be to wait and get some more spiritual sources. And once he was strong enough, he would lure the monster out and finish it off. But making any plans in the apocalypse wasn't the best idea. The monster didn't care at all what Su Yi was planning. It had its own vision for the future, which was to break the window and eat the guy. From the cracks on the window, Su Yi realized that it wouldn't last long. Although the frog monster didn't manage to break it the first time, but it clearly didn't intend to stop there. The monster relentlessly continued its attempts to break the window while Su Yi tried his best to stop it. At some point, when the monster jumped back into the water, our hero had a hope that everything was over. But he was wrong. Just a moment later, the frog monster appeared again, and this time it managed to finally smash him. Su Yi found himself face to face with the terrifying monster. He realized that the monster was much stronger than him, and he would not be able to deal with it easily. However, he had no choice but to try to hit it with his hammer. The monster frog wasn't going to stand idly by either, and attacked with its long tongue. Even a hammer loses at some point. The monster's tongue was faster, causing Su Yi to be sealed into the door. As it turned out, he wasn't even close to being a match for that vile frog. What could a person armed with only a hammer do to such a monster? Su Yi didn't know what to say to this question, but he still didn't plan to give up. One of the rules of survival in the apocalypse was to use whatever was at hand. Without thinking long, Su Yi grabbed a bed and threw it at the monster. As expected, it did not do any damage to the monster at all. However, that wasn't our hero's goal either. All he needed was to distract the creature so that it would have time to escape. Su Yi did not think of anything else but to hide in the bathtub. He hoped that because of the tight space, the monster would not be able to get to him. Meanwhile, the monster frog was scurrying around the house looking for him. Su Yi had to hold his breath and hope that it would not find him and just leave. But the miracle did not happen. In the next moment, in front of our hero appeared a huge monster mouth. Because of its size, the monster could not reach him, but his tongue could do it. However, trying to get through such a narrow opening, the frog has already signed his own sentence. Stuck in the doorway, it became completely defenseless. Shouting furiously that he would pay for trespassing, Su Yi attacked the monster with a butcher knife with all his might. The irony of this situation was that he himself was trespassing into someone else's property. But that was just unnecessary details. The blow came right on the eye, and the knife pierced the flesh without much trouble. In the next instant, green blood gushed out, and the monster frog let out a heartbreaking scream. The color of the eye changed, causing Su Yi to assume that the monster was dead. However, our hero had seen quite a few movies in the past where heroes had paid for their carelessness, so he decided to make sure it was dead. He was again on the cusp of death, but this time he was lucky and everything ended well. In addition, as a reward for killing the monster frog, he received as many as 8 spiritual sources, which was a good return on his efforts. As soon as the spiritual sources fused with his body, Su Yi felt a surge of strength. His strength had increased significantly again, and killing the monster would be much easier now. But suddenly his attention was caught by the frog's eye, from which a glowing blue orb began to appear. After popping out of the monster's eye, the ball flew straight towards Su Yi, which Su Yi couldn't help but be surprised by. The orb merged with his head without any help. Naturally, our hero was puzzled by what was happening. Although this orb looked like a spiritual source, Su Yi felt that it was something else. But once the system information window appeared in front of him, everything fell into place. It was an incomplete peaking rune that gave him the ability to spy on spirit beasts and obtain basic information about them. The evolution section also stated that the rune could evolve to a third eye with unknown abilities. After reading this, our hero was finally convinced that the risk was worth it, because not only did he get spiritual sources, but also a new ability. According to the information the system provided, the rune could be used to obtain information about spirit beasts. And the first thing Su Yi decided to do was to test it on a frog. As soon as he activated the peaking rune, a glowing sign appeared on its head. The rune really worked, and our hero recognized that in front of him lay the body of a cyclops frog. This species was part of the elite group of level 1 spirit beasts and mainly fed on inferior corpse animals. These frogs had a violent temper. Once they spotted their prey, they would never retreat. There was a possibility of evolving into a cyclops frog king. To Su Yi's surprise, the frog was indeed an elite monster. However, it was still unclear what the principle of increasing the skill level of this monster was. Flood, undead, monsters, and spiritual sources suddenly appeared. Right now, there was a truly incredible change in the world. What was once called common sense had no meaning now. However, there was also something that hadn't changed. He had only one life as before, but the dangers and risks of dying were much more. That was why he had to be very careful, and he had to get out at all costs and find out what was going on outside. The third day of the flood had arrived. In these 3 days, the rules of this world had completely changed. Su Yi's main task now was to obtain spiritual sources. Only by adapting to the apocalypse conditions and becoming stronger would he have a chance to survive. During the previous night, zombies had fled to the frog's corpse and started devouring it. Su Yi already knew how to use his new rune, so he activated it to test his victims. Unfortunately, all of the zombies turned out to be of low rank. From the information provided, he was also able to learn that they had a certain probability of evolving if they devoured their own kind. But even so, it was still something he needed, for he just needed 2 spiritual sources to get an upgrade again. His strength and agility were much higher than before, so it wasn't difficult for him to deal with all the zombies in an instant. In the end, Su Yi was successfully able to obtain the spirit sources he needed. Without wasting any time, he immediately started upgrading. After completing it, the system informed him that he had become a level 2 psychic, and the spiritual sources needed for the next improvement were already 20. After the enhancement, just like last time, our hero had a choice of body parts to upgrade. In addition to his stomach and lungs, this time there was also an opportunity to strengthen his muscles. At this point, Su Yi could already hold his breath for at least 4 minutes, but the problem was that he could encounter something very terrible in the water, and it would be of no use at all. Reasoning this way, he made decisions to improve his muscles this time. Strengthening his muscles meant more muscle mass, more strength, better muscle control, and better durability. Therefore, he had no doubts about his choice. In the next instant, Su Yi felt a previously unknown feeling. The surge of strength, as well as the increase in strength, was nothing compared to when he had absorbed the spiritual sources. Now his strength, as well as his ability to control his body, had greatly increased. He could freely feel every muscle in his body. With great strength comes great responsibility. It was with these words that Su Yi set out with the hammer in his hands to crush the zombies. He was eager to test his new skills, and luckily he didn't have to look for a sparring partner for a long time. To be exact, not a partner, but rather a punching bag. As expected, the zombie was defeated with just one punch. Su Yi, on the other hand, was not accustomed to exerting too much force and could hardly stand on his feet. This strength was definitely what he needed, and now with it, he could continue moving forward. In just a few seconds, he had dealt with the remaining walking dead, which was a good practice to get used to the new power. However, to Su Yi's surprise, after killing them, he still hadn't obtained a single spiritual source. But that didn't upset him too much. He realized that the level of these zombies was not high enough to raise his level. He needed to look for stronger opponents, and for that, he needed to finally come out of the shadows and stop hoping for something. It was today that he had to finish the raft and get the hell out of here. After gathering the necessary supplies and equipment, Su Yi set off on his first journey. Although it wasn't that big, and his goal was just a neighboring building, it was very important in terms of research and discovery. A small step for a man, and a huge one for all of humanity. But even such a distance of a few tens of meters was not on a joke frightening, because our hero did not know what was under the water and what kind of monster he could meet. But he didn't have much choice, because on that building he would probably have starved to death sooner or later. After finally reaching the building, Soo-yi first thing he did was to break the window. It was through this window that he planned to sneak in. Now he was facing the unknown, in which many different dangers could lurk. He didn't know what awaited him inside, but he had to move forward. After finding no signs of life in the room, Soo-yi finally decided to climb inside. There was the same thick layer of dust on the furniture as his neighbors. In the next room, the situation was similar. It was clear that someone had long since left this place. Unfortunately, all the food that had been there had already spoiled. But our hero still had hope that people might have managed to escape to the roof. However, suddenly Soo-yi's attention was attracted by the strong smell of spoiled blood that came from the neighboring room. Deciding to check, he cautiously opened the door. Inside, a not-so-pleasant sight awaited him. In a pool of blood lay the corpses of several zombies. It is important to clarify that these were not living people, but zombies that someone had killed. The question was, who killed them? It was unlikely that the monsters would attack each other, so Soo-yi had a hope that there might be survivors like him hiding in this building. To check this, he immediately activated his peeking rune. As he searched the building, he came across quite a large number of more dead zombies. Based on the number of them, Soo-yi assumed that the person who did this must have been a spiritual source carrier like him as well. However, it was still unclear whether he was still here or not. After finding a locked apartment, he started knocking and asking if there was someone inside. He got no answer, but suddenly noticed a key lying on the ground. When he opened the door and went inside, he found a dead man lying on the floor with a baseball bat in his hands. Most likely, it was with it that he had managed to deal with all the evil. The peeking rune didn't identify him as a walking dead body, which meant he was the survivor. It was obvious from the huge claw marks on his shirt that he had been defeated by a monster like that giant frog. And perhaps if he had arrived a little earlier, he might have survived. However, now it was not important. The past could not be returned. Therefore, our hero decided to inherit his weapon and continue fighting. However, suddenly, his rune reacted to the living creature and glowed with a bright light. The very next moment, Soo-yi heard some faint sounds coming from the closet. Walking over to it, he cautiously started to open the door. There was no telling what was in there, so extra caution would not hurt. Holding his breath for a moment, Soo-yi swung the door open with a sharp movement and prepared to attack if necessary. But as it turned out, there was no need. From what he saw, our hero's eyes opened wide with surprise. In the closet in front of him sat a little girl who was looking at him with a blank stare.